Hi friends, this is Marie at LivingFelt, and today we have a darling needle felting tutorial for you. We're going to show you how to needle felt these miniature dolls that I'm calling the Love Gnomes. This is a great beginner project. It's fun to make a miniature doll and maybe emulate them after someone you know. We're going to be forming small armatures, little tiny bodies using some of our wool batting. I'll show you how to add the hats and the beards and put them all together, and we'll finish them off with some darling little boots. I chose to mount mine on a little wood disc and add some moss and some mushrooms and some cute natural elements. I can't wait to see what you do with yours, so let me show you how to make them. We're using our CW1 core wool for this project. This is Berkshire raspberry, some MC1 batting for other clothes and also for skin tones. And for the hair, we've chosen our New Zealand Corriedale. It's got a long stable length and beautiful natural striations. For this project, we need basic needle felting supplies along with a few additional tools. See everything in the supply list via the link down below. You can also shop the supplies page for this project. A few additional things you might need as well. For each doll, we'll use one 20 gauge wire that's 16 inches long. Cut it at 10 inches, so you'll have a 10-inch piece and a 6-inch piece. Fold the 10-inch piece in half, and we'll make a small loop at the top. We'll do a couple of twists. This starts to form our neck area, and then spread a nice V there and twist. That's how we get this going. We'll take our 6-inch wire and insert it into that opening and continue to twist. Later in the video, I'll show you all these measurements, but just give it a couple of twists and you can decide exactly how long you want your torso and legs of your body to be, or you can follow the measurements that we show you up ahead. To anchor those arms, we are going to wrap them all the way around the torso and back to the starting place. My one tip here is to kind of keep them aligned so that one's not high and one's low, and if that happens, you can just use your pliers to sort of pinch them together. Once you have the wool in place, it's not really going to be noticeable. We don't stop here because there's a little play in the arms, so use your floral tape just to bind it. And notice the pattern here if you're not familiar with wrapping armature for the neck, shoulder area, and body. You're going to use this same pattern for the wool. So we kind of go over one shoulder and around the torso, and then back over the other shoulder and around the torso. And this allows you to form like a figure 8 or a little infinity loop. And with the key with floral tape is just to stretch it, and if you stretch it, then it that activates the sticky part and it'll stick to itself. So just squish it down and it'll be fine. And now our arms are nice and stable. So a quick look at the measurements here. We're going to mark each arm to be 2 inches long, and then we'll cut off that excess and fold each little hand area back. When you're snipping small wires like this, hold the end so it doesn't go flying across your room where you or your pet or child or grandchild could step on it. A slight curl here will give us something to help our wool to grab onto. You'll notice that I don't use a chenille stem on the body of these dolls, and if you want to, now's the time to add them, but I chose not to. Our legs here, you see the length. I'm just going to twist them back up and not cut any off. So you can freeze frame there, go back if you need to see the measurements, and really it's subjective. Your dolls can be whatever size you want. We start our little dolls by wrapping the fiber around the hands, the feet or legs, and the neck area. The trick here is we're working with a short staple fiber. It's also crimpy, so it's nice and grippy, but we want to pull off very small, thin, controllable bits. And we start wrapping the arm just about in the forearm area, down to the hand, around the hand. Let it stick off a little bit. You'll fold that little extra amount over and back down onto the hand. Notice we really take our time here because we want no lumps or folds or twists in the fiber. So you want to pull just enough tension that you can pull it tight without breaking it. So here we fold it over the hand, and then we're going to wrap back over that. This is very thin and squirrely, but we use the pressure of our fingers to cause those fibers to kind of entangle by twisting it and holding pressure between our fingers. If your fiber is not quite so grippy, you can add a little bit of adhesive or like a 50-50 solution with like a fabric glue and water and just tack it down on these hands and arms especially. But I'm just going to use my felting needle and lightly tack it in place. The hands may get a little roughed up, so just be delicate as you're working with them. And I chose not to use any sort of fabric stiffener or glues on this project. You absolutely can if it's easier for you. And just repeat the same thing on the opposite hand. With our hands and arms done, we're going to do the legs, and this is just like you did with the hands. When we're working with our dark fiber, you can use any fiber you like. The reason I like to start mid-leg or mid arm or leg as opposed to the very end is it gives you something that you can wrap back over and sort of anchor and seal in place with those overwraps. I used to start at the very end, and I might do that on a big project that I'm going to wrap over, but these little projects, you want the very fingertips or the tips of the feet to not be too thick with fiber, so starting mid-leg allows you to anchor it down when you wrap back up. In all cases, as you do this, thin, controllable bits will help you from getting lumps and folds and bumps. And with the legs, we're going to do a couple of layers until they're the thickness that you want. So just anchor it down with your felting needle when you start and stop. And if you have any super fluffy areas, you can tack them down. But a lot of that you can capture when you do the second or third layers, depending on how beefy you want your little doll to be, and use your fine felting needles then to needle felt at very shallow angles and try not to poke all the way through to your work surface. Try just to tack those fibers down with little shallow pokes. The 42 triangle has the notches just towards the tip that you can use, and that is very, very helpful. To wrap the neck, we're going to start at the torso, anchor it there, and then wrap around the neck, back down the shoulders, and around the torso. You don't have to be too thick here. We're just starting it, so there's some skin tone that will be underneath the shirt because we're going to add a little bit of neck after we put the head in place. I've used that neck loop as a holder up to this point, and you can pinch it smaller now if you want, or whenever you're ready to put the head on. Doing the sleeves and the shirt is the exact same thing. It's up to you what you want this clothing to look like. Ours is very, very simple, but just repeat the same thing you did with the legs, and that's starting mid-arm, down to the wrist, and then back towards the torso, always keeping control. And the key again is to keep your fiber very thin, narrow, and to apply just enough tension to hold it taut and just to keep the air out as you wrap. So make it small enough that you can control it. You will notice that sometimes your fiber feels a little too wide for the area where you want to apply it. So just tear that little bit of fiber off so that it's out of your way. And then you make it as narrow as you need. Take time to tack it down when you start and finish each little bit. We're going to make our sleeves a little bit of a bell-shaped sleeve, which is just one of my favorite things. I don't know why. I just tack it down a little bit to start, and then we're just going to build up right at the end here of the sleeve. You'll notice that we're building it up, and I didn't create any folds to, give a hard edge, because this little area is so tiny that all we have to do is wrap it and wrap it to give it volume, and then we can just tack down right into the very end to create what will be the edge of the sleeve. And then just take your time and needle felt the whole thing down so that it's nice and smooth and firm. You don't want it loose and wispy so that every time you touch it, it gets roughed up. You want this entire project to be well needle felted down. And it is possible if you just take your time at each stage. To build up the torso, using core wool is optional, and we are including it in the kit so that you can save your dyed fiber. So if you have, huge amounts of your dyed fiber, you can use it here where we're showing you how to build up the torso, or you can just use this here now, and you'll be glad that you have those sleeves already in place. You would see when you get up to the narrow end of the chest and the neck that covering that core wool can be a little challenging. So I'm using it here to build up. It's not going to be a very beefy doll because I make it very firm, but yours can be as full as you want. Now we're just showing how to make the clothing for one doll. This is my little man doll, and for the girl, the only difference is that her tunic is longer and a little bit more full, a little bit more bell-shaped. The one thing you want to do is make sure that you needle felt at each time you do a length of wraps. You want to make it very firm. So you see I switched to my 38 star spiral and needle felt up to from the bottom of the bell as well, what would be the seat of the doll or the very bottom of the tunic, so that it builds that firmness and volume. Needle felt the whole thing. If you want it bigger, just add more wool, and then remember that you're also going to add your dyed fiber over top. So you'll get more volume there as well, but the key here is to make it very firm. And I switched to my Poquito tool because it's great for compaction and general shaping, especially once you have a little distance between the outside of the wool and your armature. With our core wool in place, it's time to cover it up with our final color. I just needle felt a bit into the base to cover that seat area and then wrap it around to cover the top. Super easy peasy. When you build a firm undershape and you use your fine needles on the external or final color, you'll find that you end up with very few needle marks in your project. To create the very bottom of the tunic, I'm going to take a length that's just long enough to wrap all the way around, needle felt up the middle, leaving the edges unfelted. Do this on both sides, and you might do it a couple of times. You want to compact it, but then fold it in half lengthwise and needle felt that down. You're only needle felting the very edge of the fold. Leave all of the rest nice, loose, and fluffy. And by building up some density here off of your doll, this gives us the opportunity to wrap it around the bottom of our doll and give us a nice rim. To do this, I fold it in a little card. This is just a little greeting card, and I use that sandwich protection for my fingers so that I can needle felt right into that edge and give it some body. So once that's done and you have some density to it, wrap it around the base of your doll, needle felt it in place, and you have a great little edge at the bottom of your tunic or shirt or coat or whatever you're making. With our tunic in place, we use the same exact process to make little socks for our doll, and we could have done it just like we did with the sleeves as well. Honestly, this fiber that I'm using, this magenta pink, is a little more wiry than our MC one. Doesn't tame quite as easily, but just use the same process to make the socks for your doll. With the basics of our clothes in place, it's time to make the heads. We're using a very small bit of fiber, and the heads I'm making are about 1 inch, maybe just a pinch larger for the boy. We start with a long strip of core wool, roll it into a tube, tuck in the corners, needle felt it, tuck, roll, needle felt, roll, tuck. You want this to be very, very firm, so you'll see I'm using my 38 star spiral. Get it round-ish, spherical-ish, and just keep poking it from all sides. The firmer this piece is, the easier it's going to be to get your face nice and smooth when you put on the final color. You can also use the little Poquito tool. I like it for compaction once I have my ball started, and just keep poking wherever it's lumpy to make it nice and round. With our undershape ready, we're going to cover our head in the skin tone of your choice. You need just enough for a slight overlap around and just a little bit above, a little extra on the top and bottom. So I anchor it down on one end, lightly tack it down, always definitely using my fine felting needle here until I get that complete wrap around. This is like a nice draft. After tacking it down, I'll use my hands to just pinch it towards the end and pull off any extra, and this allows me to needle felt it all down without a bunch of folds and lumps and bumps. So you'll see if you try this process, it's going to pull off just the right amount. Tack all of that down till it's nice and smooth, and then just check out your head and decide which is going to be the face or the top or whatever. Our head is all nicely formed, and now it's time to make a hole where we can insert it onto the neck wire. You can use an awl, either a straight awl or a tapered awl. We carry both. And if you have our LivingFelt scissors, which are part of our Shape Maker's kit, and we also sell them a la carte, you can make the same hole. I always test and make sure I have a good fit on my doll, and man, that's so cute. Now, you can glue your head into place, and if you do, just put your nice glue right on the end of that wire, whether you use super glue or whatever you like. I like my silicone glue, but I don't always glue my heads on. What we will do is take some of the same fiber for our neck, anchor it to the bottom of the head, wrap it around the neck a couple of times, and then needle felt it into place. With the neck wire here, it's very shallow, so shallow pokes, and anchor it underneath the top of the tunic and into the base of the head. Now for our little girl doll, we're giving her somewhat of a face, and I'll be using the black, the skin tone, and the raspberry. We'll start with a tiny, tiny button nose, and really this is so dinky. You can build it up in a couple of passes if you want, but just make yourself the tiniest little bud of a ball. Needle felt it just below the halfway point or right at the halfway point of that spear and tack it in place. And if you need it a little bit bigger, just patch a little more wool on top. The nose is just like a suggestion of a nose for her. For her eyes, we're going kind of after the sweet little peg doll look, so tiny bits of black, roll it between your fingers, and then break that in half, and you'll have about the same amount for each eye. We're making her eye like a closed eyelid, so anchor down one point, needle felt it into a gentle arch, and then needle felt the final tail in, and you could just twist it and bury it into the face. You don't have to trim it off or anything, and you're going to get it to be just exactly the length you want. And then once you have that one how you like it, just repeat the same on the second eye. Now to make the cheeks, this can be fast or slow, however you want to do it, but I like to make a little blend with the skin tone and the raspberry, and we're just going to layer stack, pull, layer stack, pull, layer stack, pull, and you see I like to just put it on the face. How big do I want this cheek to be? Maybe I want it to be a little bit smaller of a rosy area. Pull it off, and then needle felt it gently down with your fine felting needle. The key is you don't want to stretch the fibers when you needle felt them down. That's why you want to use a fine felting needle, and you just want to puff the whole piece down when you put it on. If it's too strong when you put it on, just put a thin patch of the skin tone right over it and tack it down. This is just a learning process to decide what you like, so have fun with it and then match it on the other side. Now it's time to make our hats. They're both made the same way. We're going to take a chenille stem and cut it in half. The one chenille stem serves for both dolls. I just fold the top down to about 2 finger lengths and make a little hook. Within that hook, I anchor my hat fiber color, then make a little twist. I'm angling up the very bottom so I know where I want to stop the hats. Your hat can be as long as you want. I think mine are about 3 inches long or 3 or 4 finger lengths long. We're going to start wrapping it around the tip of the chenille stem. Again, very, very tight. You want to anchor everything down so that there's not a lot of air. The less air, then the faster you can needle felt it. Just like we've done the rest of the doll, you're going to needle felt it nice and firm. And I build mine up so that the cone at the base, once we've needle felted the whole thing, is just slightly bigger than the head of the doll. Remember to go into the base of the hat and even needle felt from all angles, including up from the bottom.
meaning like perpendicular with the fiber, because that's going to build density. So take your time, make it super dense, and if you do, then it won't get roughed up every time you go to handle your doll. With our hat about the size we want, then we can cut off that chenille stem. Just push the wool down and pull on the chenille stem at the same time before you snip it, and then see if it's about the right size for your doll. Now for our little girl, we need to put her hair on first. I'm giving her long braids, and this is where our binder clip comes in. I want her hair to be very long, like almost as long as her. We need a little extra for that so we can anchor it into the top of her head. Give it a couple of twists so that your binder clip can grab onto it there and hold onto it for you. And you need a little excess up there because that's where we will anchor it to her head. So we're just going to make a braid, divide it into 3, and I want her braid to be fairly loose, not overly tight. This stuff is crazy wispy. You're going to lose some. Just have fun with it. We're going to make a very long braid, twist, twist, twist. And then when we get to the bottom, I will pull off a tiny piece of fiber, wrap it around the end of that braid to anchor it and hold it in place. You can then use your felting needle to just give it a couple of tacks. And if you want to give her ribbons, you can. Totally optional, up to you. Once we have that all done, then I like to just give it a snip with my scissors, kind of across the bottom, and then snip into the end so that it has just a little wispiness to it. So have fun styling that hair however you want. To anchor this on the head of our doll, first I make sure I find the positioning, and I'm going to cut off any excess that I don't need because I want it, again, to be just about as tall as she is before she has her little boots on. This is a little different than the way you've seen me anchor hair maybe before because we're just putting this whole big braid on her head, but most of her head's going to be covered with the hat. So you see that we're needle felting right down the middle, get that nice and anchored, and then we are going to flip the whole thing over to the other side of her head. Repeat on the opposite side. So now we have these 2 braids. I've pushed the excess towards the back for the most part. On the one side, she has a little bit left, but I'm not too worried about it because I'm going to tack it down. And then we're going to attach her head, again with our straight pin. So get your pin to anchor it down. Needle felt this hat right to her head and get it very, very secure. I don't glue it at all. I just needle felt the whole thing together all the way around. We're going to create a brim of her hat the same way we did the tunic and everything else that has a bit of a rim. You're going to get a piece that's long enough, fold it in half, form some density, and then attach it to the base of her hat. What you see here is I'm using a piece that's much bigger than I need, but first I'm just going to piece it onto her hat, figure out how big I need it, and then rip off the excess. You don't have to fuss about it too much because you're just lightly needle felting it before you place it. Needle felt it on and get it nice and blended in with the rest of the hat. If you need to add any extra bulk, definitely do it now. And then we're just going to clean up the back of her head where it's kind of messy, and we'll use some of that cut fiber and fold it over. So you'll see we get a piece that's twice as long as we need. We'll needle felt it down the middle of what will be the back of her head, fold it over, tuck it up underneath the braid, needle felt it down, and then needle felt the braid down right on top of it. And by waiting to do this till the very end, you only have to do it as much as you need, and it won't get all messed up when you're putting the hat on. So repeat, do that on both sides. For our little boy doll, he is going to get a beard and then a nose on top of that. And this is totally subjective, and I was playing with it the whole time I was making it. Ended up being a little bit different. But what I do is tear off a piece of fiber that's like twice as long as I need it. And he's actually kind of skinny, so it doesn't need to be super wide. But what we're going to do is take about as much fiber as you think you want for his beard, anchor it right underneath his hat. So needle felt it underneath his hat, and then we're going to needle felt it kind of down to his face and then start shaping it with our scissors. So we fold it over, finish anchoring more underneath, and then just decide how wide you want it to be. Play with it with your hands and decide, what you think that basic shape is. And as you do it, you can use your scissors to start to shape it. Cut it off, play with it, cut some into the top layers or all the way through, whatever you like. But look, you can't get this wrong. If you don't like it, you can always rip it out and just give him a new beard. Once I have the beard basically in shape, then I'm going to give him a little button nose, and his nose is much bigger than Mama's is. These little dolls are like my little love gnomes. The girls say that they're me and my husband, Rodney Jean, so I'm totally fine with that. We needle felt his nose and we anchor him right underneath his hat. And you'll see that this looks like there's a little extra extension, and there is. I just use it to kind of start, and then I'll push that nose up and needle felt it right onto the face there. Feel free to add any more fiber onto his beard if you want and do any final shaping. I even took a little bit of Mama's hair and lightened the very front of his beard so that it was just a little bit lighter in the final. It's all fluffy, but I used my felting needles to coax it all down in the final doll and get it laying nicely on his chest. To finish our little dolls and give them a firm foundation, we glue little boots on them. And these boots are in the kit, or one similar, depending on what we have available at that time. Hers are a little big, which I actually like because it makes it look extra kind of cute. And then he has the socks, which helps him match her a little bit better. I use my silicone glue for this. I love it. It's a nice firm hold, and it dries slow enough that you can make adjustments if you need. Just get your doll standing before you're all done.
That's it. I can't wait to see how you display your gnomes. We chose to finish ours off on this little wood disc, add some moss and then some natural elements found on the forest where I live, as well as some mushrooms I made out of clay. And I can't wait to see what yours come out like too. Be sure to comment down below. Let us know your favorite takeaway, or maybe what couple you're going to model your little gnome dolls after. And we hope you'll share them. Tag us on Instagram at LivingFelt, and share them in our group, LivingFelt Friends, on Facebook. Can't wait to see yours.